Hello, we're going to be subtracting the numbers this time instead of adding numbers. And subtracting is a little bit more difficult for students. It's always been a little bit more difficult for students. Adding tends to be the easiest of the four operations. But as long as you keep some perspectives in mind, and as long as you either have a good number sense or you can look at something or picture something on a number line, it makes sense. I also count on my fingers. Even I count on my fingers sometimes. Not often, but sometimes I do. Well, anyways, we're going to be subtracting numbers here. And I remember when I first got into teaching, I always thought, oh, this is going to be easy, teaching students subtracting. But I found that it wasn't always that easy, and I found that there were some tips, some ideas that I could use that seemed to make it a little bit easier. So let me go ahead and explain this. We're going to subtract -3 minus 2. Another way that students can write this that I found makes it a little bit easier is this. You can also think about it as -3 plus a -2. You're adding cold to it. You're subtracting the number and adding a negative number is exactly the same thing. I've always done it the first way, but I realize that some students don't know how to do it the first way very well, and they look at the second way and say, oh, I can do this. But for them, this one is very difficult, but this one's very easy. So you can either write -3 minus 2, or you can put a plus in between two numbers if there's a subtraction there, and it's the same exact thing. And I'll go ahead and show you. So start at -3, and I'm going to subtract 2. I'm going to make it colder. Well, I'm going to make it colder too, so I'm going to go to the left. 1, 2. Or I'm going to start at -3, and I'm going to add -2. That means I'm going to add 2 cold units, or I'm going to add to the left twice. So I start at -3, and I add 2. And I'm still at -5. Like I said, I don't understand why it works better for some students than others, but different people think differently. It's really that simple. Not everybody thinks the same. Sometimes something that's easy for one person might not be easy for another. So if you explain it slightly different, you might end up helping out the other person who otherwise would have not understood that first explanation. This kind of goes the same way. I can write this as 3 subtract 2, or I can write this as 3 plus -2. But most students can do this one without too much problems. But let's go ahead and start. So start at 3, and we're going to subtract 2. 1, 2. The answer is 1. Or I can write 3, and I'm going to add -2. I'm going to make it colder. Colder is this way, hotter is to the right. Answer is still 1. You can write it 2 different ways, and the answer is still going to come out the same way. For this one, I've got -3 minus -2. Usually very difficult for students. Keep this in mind. You're going to start at -3, and you're going to subtract cold. You're not adding cold, so you're not going to make it colder, but you're going to take away the cold weather. And if you take away the cold weather, you're going to make it warmer. That might seem a little difficult, so let me go ahead and show you a different way. If you see 2 negative signs next to each other without a number separating them, 2 negatives make a positive. This is another way to think about it. You can write it either way, and either way is fine. Now you might say, well, which way is the right way to do it? Whichever way will get you the correct answer. Whichever way will help you think about it so that when you take your quizzes, when you take your tests, when you have to explain these problems to someone else, you can do it better. So whichever way you like, whichever way you feel more comfortable, is the way that I would recommend that you go ahead and do it. I actually like thinking about it like this. I have trouble thinking about it like this for some bizarre reason. I always turn my 2 negatives into a positive. It just makes more sense to me. So I start at -3, and I'm adding 2, so it's going to be a little bit warmer. Well, still negative, but it's not as bad as it was before. Answer is -1. This is the same exact answer. You can think about it as -3, then I'm taking away 2 cold units. Still -1. But I would recommend, if you see 2 negatives in a row, you change it to a positive. That's what I would recommend if I had to give one. Same thing here. 2 negatives in a row without a number in between, make it positive. And if you start at 3, pardon me, that's embarrassing. If you start at 3 and you add 2, it's going to get warmer. It's going to be 5. Well, it's the same thing here. If you start at 3 and you take away 2 of those cold units, it means you're actually adding temperature. Also 5. A brief introduction to adding and subtracting numbers, but I still think very useful because you're using a number line. You're using a picture in your head to help figure out a concept. That's it for now. Have a good day.